special guest tonight is the co-director and co-star of the film you just watched, Ben Safdie.
Making this an awesome screen. So thanks for staying until the final Iggy Pop words.
Very important.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna get this one out of the way before somebody decides to ask it. What the hell was Robert Pattinson talking about, jerking off a dog?
Yeah.
What kind of joke was that, man?
It was nothing, because like you watch the movie, you're like, where would that even go?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
So
That's just his weird sense of humor.
Yeah. Apparently he was trying to make fun of Josh in some way, and it spiraled out of control.
But you guys have a really interesting story about how he came to be in this film, right?
Yeah, he saw a still of heaven knows what on IndieWire, and he was like so enamored with this still that he reached out through a friend to get in touch with Josh, and then he emailed him this very cryptic email about how the still meant so much to him and how he felt like he wanted to be a part of that film, and it was like a part of his life, like purpose in life to be in this movie. And it was like, all off of, he hadn't even seen the movie yet. The movie hadn't come out yet. The trailer hadn't come out yet. And it was such conviction behind just this one still. So we met with him, and he had then seen the movie in the trailer, and he just was like, I'll do anything. I'll do catering even. And it was just like, he wasn't right for Uncut Gems, which is about like the kind of Bukharian Jewish culture in he claims he would be fine for that. It doesn't quite fit there.
I think I know a certain internet that would probably have a big problem with that one.
But people have come up to us and like, he's right for that. He could do it. He could do it. Look, if he can do this, he can do anything. But he said, I want to disappear into a role, and specifically with Heaven Knows What, he's like, I want to be in that energy. And so we said, okay, let's take that and put it into genre. Let's see what we can do here, because he fits a certain kind of archetype in a way. We could work with that.
I mean, it's a very specific character. Like I think I know people like this who have nothing and yet still have that weird sense of like white male privilege and entitlement.
100%, yeah.
Was it, and I have to ask because throughout the film he's sort of exploiting all of these women, older people, his brother, and a lot of people of color. Was that an intentional choice?
Yeah, what ends up happening is you latch yourself on to the movie doesn't start from his point of view, it starts from Nick's point of view. And then he barges in and just takes Nick out, and then the audience as well, on his ride. And you go along with him at full speed, so much so that you don't really have time to be like, wait a second, like you're looking both ways, trying to stop and say, this is wrong, but he's moving you so fast that you don't really get a time to stop. Somebody said something really interesting to me that like, they were rooting for him, and then he's in the back of the cop car, and then they're like, wait a second, no, this is good that he's arrested, and it just hits you there, and there's like this, the only thing I can relate to it is when those people broke out of jail upstate, David Matt and Richard Sweat, or I might have them, David Sweat or Richard Matt, that's it. But all of America was kind of rooting for these guys to get to the border. It's like, oh my God, they're a mile from Canada. And you kind of fall into this kind of cool hand Luke mindset. And it was only when they got caught that you're like, this guy's a murderer. He's a senseless murderer. And all of your morals kind of go out the window when you're just kind of, something else is waved in front of your eyes. And in this case, it's his brother, and you forget that he put his brother in the position in the first place. So you're like, oh, he's trying to save his brother. But he put his brother in jail. So yes, but it was a very conscious decision, for it to be Barcod, in that he takes advantage of, and the optics of that whole situation in the amusement park. He knows what he's going to present to those two cops. He knows how that's going to look. Yeah. And there's the one moment where between him and Crystal, the character, it's the one time to kind of cut back and forth between the two of them. It's like the one time in the movie where we ever really do that, where he gives this look to her like, I'm sorry that I have to do this, but I have to do it, and it's just because he's a scumbag on his own mission, But he's gonna take advantage of that situation, and it's definitely a thing, that you realize, okay, you have to think about that and come to terms with that, and come to terms with how that's even realistic, So.
When did you decide that you should play Nikki? Like, why didn't you choose a mentally challenged actor to take that role?
Well, originally in 2010, Ronald Bronstein, Ronnie, who made an amazing movie, Frownland. I don't know if anybody's seen it. If you haven't, go see it. But he and I were going to make a movie together, and I was going to play a character in it. And he kind of asked me to go inside myself and exaggerate parts of my own emotional state, emotional insecurities I had, social insecurities I had, parts of my life where I kind of shut off from the world, and exaggerate them even further. So I kind of mind myself. I developed this way of speaking to just kind of even further alienate myself. And we created this character, Jordan, with this backstory of the grandmother and everything. And then we'd done all these rehearsals and filmed them, but the movie never happened. So what ended up happening was he took that backstory and applied it with Josh into this film, because we had this, he's like, I have this great character I've always wanted to see realized, and me too, you know, I wanted to see it. And originally I wasn't going to play it. We did look to cast somebody who is disabled. He's in the hallway, and he's also at the end. We looked at that whole group. They're called the Epic Players. It's a whole group of disabled people who perform, you know, they're actors. And but the group that she's running, they're all a part of that troupe. But as we were interviewing people and just talking to them, we realized the speed at which we would need to make the movie and some of the action sequences, which were difficult for us even. You know, we'd have to be working at such a pace that we'd have to push them and do things to manipulate them to get to our end result. Just even in the rehearsals, to just talk to them, it felt uncomfortable for us. You know, we didn't want to make a movie where it was like immoral in that way. You know, it was like shock value for that purpose, and also pushing somebody where they didn't want to go. That was very apparent, and so it was nothing against them. It was just their speed at which we needed to work. But in that process, we were meeting a lot of interesting people, and then I'm watching them and listening to them and hearing things about how they may have interpreted words. You know, one of the kids came in and was telling us that his mom said something to him, and he wasn't going to be able to have any friends ever again if he didn't go in and do the interview, like if he didn't go and do the rehearsal. And I was like, there's no way that she said that, but he definitely heard something from her that made him think that, and he thought that 100%. So I took that in, and I was like, huh. And then at some point, then we looked at actors, and then the actors couldn't do it because they were playing the part, and that was offensive to me, because I'm like, you can tell that they're playing somebody who's disabled. It's like, oh, I can see you, and I can see what you think is acceptable, you know, and it was just pretend. And I was like, I can do this. I know I can, because I feel like I am the character. I have a part of it inside of me. So when I'm playing Nick, I'm being him. You know, I'm aware of my vocabulary and my feelings, but when I'm playing and when I'm acting as Nick, I kind of delete the separation between the two of us, and I'll just be him. So if I'm aware of something, an emotion that Nick is feeling, I'm hyper aware that Nick doesn't feel that emotion, if that makes sense. So there was a moment, like I was saying, the end scene was so difficult for me to film, because I had to be in character the entire time for like the whole 17 hours of that day, because with all the people in that group, we didn't want to tell them that day that I was acting, because the line is so fine. I'm like, what's acting, what's pretend, what's making fun of, what's this? Just in general, the line is so hard to understand. So we told them afterwards that I was acting, but in the moment, they all just thought I was Nick, this guy who was part of the group. So I had to take that, do it the whole day, and people would come up to me and try and talk to me, and Nick doesn't want to talk to anybody. So I would just kind of shut off, and it was very uncomfortable and strange being in his mind for that period of time. And I just remembered there was one take where I started hysterically crying, you know, myself. But that was only because I knew what I was capable of thinking and feeling. But Nick isn't aware of what I'm aware of, so I wanted to kind of erase that. So what you get is you see him engaging in the group in a way that he would never engage ever anywhere else. You know, he tries so hard not to even respond to the simplest questions, and yet he can't help it. You know, there's something really beautiful about that. So
I want to throw this out to the audience. Do any of you have any questions, concerns?
Rance?
Yes, up here.
Can you talk about your process casting the movie? You have a lot of very interesting players aside from yourself in it.
Thank you. Yeah, the casting process was interesting. You know, we had Jennifer Vendetti was like kind of leading the whole casting charge, and we had a bunch of street casting in addition, you know, led by Eleanor Hendricks. And that whole the whole process was filming everybody, interviewing everybody. If they were on screen for 5 seconds to any speaking role, they would have to go through a full improv scene, and we would watch everything. Because each person had to be a character that we'd want to watch, So we had to it had to pass a really high bar. And yeah, we wanted to mix in within the world of, Robert Pattinson and Jennifer Jason Leigh and Barcott, we wanted to mix in, I guess, non-actors or first-time actors is what we say. They're actors, it's the first time they've been given the opportunity. One of the perfect example is Gladys, the woman who plays the grandmother. She showed up and she just blew me away with what she was capable of doing, and she was so incredible at not only learning her lines, but just the ability to say anything and have it be believable. She could say anything, and you'd buy it completely. And I remember there was one time where her and Rob were acting opposite one another, and she just stopped. And I was like, "What's wrong, Gladys?" She said, "Well, he's not saying his line. So yeah, I need him to say his line before I could say my line." So she became the hyper-professional in that moment over him. And I was like, it's just so funny to see how it all kind of becomes this soup of just beautiful, just characters vibing off one another. And yeah, just everybody had to fit and be perfect, And there's a couple of people who, in the end, we were like, we could have done a little bit better, but I won't say. But for the most part, we watched everybody's interview and how they interacted with other people, and we wanted it to kind of feel like each person that was there, you were walking by and you could follow them and have a story too.
Does anybody else have any questions? Way back there.
Yeah, I just want to say you guys always do such amazing work with your films, and I really feel like you don't get maybe the credit you deserve in a way, but maybe this will change that. But my question is, was Robert Pattinson consciously channeling Vincent Gallo, or was that just sort of a happy accident?
We were just talking about that. He was in opposite, especially when he's opposite Jennifer in The Cat. She had spoken to him or acted in one of his things. I don't know what it was, but she knew him, and she's like, he sounded a lot like Vinny there, and there's just something about that type of personality that I think is reminiscent, that's similar. That you can't help but channel this almost like that you believe, and it's like almost like a cult leader. He can say something that you don't necessarily believe, but he's saying it so convincingly that you're like, okay, I'll go. Oh, yeah, of course. I've you listen to some of the things that Vinny says, and you're like, oh yeah, of course. Then you step back for a second, like, whoa. But I think with Rob in that moment, and in other moments, he just kind of he's playing into that whole like what we were talking about earlier. There's this kind of good-looking criminal who thinks that they can get away with so much just because of the way that they look and how they act, and they bring that confidence even when they're being horrible people. And I think in that moment in the cab, it's really interesting because he's lying, and you just have to watch how he lies and watch how he pulls it off, and that in part becomes part of the narrative, and that's what we've learned throughout all of our other films is how do we take these pieces of character study from like a documentary like Lenny Cook or Heaven Knows What, which is based on reality, but it's a fictionalized version. How do we take all these things and we always want to get better. And in this sense, we're like, how do we take all that and add it to a genre film? It's meant to be consumed, and you're meant to move with it and enjoy it, and then look back at it and think, who are these characters? And when does the perspective switch? When does the music stop? And think about all that stuff after the fact.
The thing I noticed too, like the second time around, is just the way that he looks at everyone is how can I exploit this person? Mm-hmm. Like he walks into that one hospital ward, and he immediately clocks the nurse.
He finds he's looking around for the guy that he can turn, and he sees that guy just sitting there eating his meal, and he knows that he can get the information out of him. And again, it's another situation where you're watching, what he's doing. And you have to just watch how he's going to do it.
Yeah. Do you have any more questions? I think there was another one.
More. Keep that up.
We'll get this guy up here, or this person, sorry.
One of the things that stood out the most for me was how realistic the dialogue felt. I want to see if you could talk more about how you got that process.
Yeah, it's just a mix of how you kind of the vibe will build on the set is more of like a construction site than it is a movie set. You know, so everybody's working towards the end result, and nobody's really standing around just like looking at their phone doing nothing. So there's this energy there that you can make a mistake and you can try things that might sound crazy, or there's just a freedom there that hopefully that we feel we build. And part of it is just allowing, you know, there you have the dialogue as written, which Rob stuck to pretty. That was like an anchor for him. But there were times where it's like there were certain words that if they don't sound right, you're not going to force him to say it. You know, we're going to figure out how to best to come up with something, and how like it's certain verbs or certain nouns that may have sounded weird coming out of his mouth. You know, like in the beginning, he's supposed to say something different to Peter, and it just sounded better. It's like shame on you, shame on me. It's like shame on you. It's like like a petty little kid saying that to somebody. But that's what sounded right. So there's just moments of where you have to just be free and open to what people are saying, and if it doesn't feel right. And it doesn't mean throwing the whole script out the window. It just means just being conscious to what feels real. And yeah, again, we've been dealing with realism for a long time, almost 10 years at this point. Just like, how do you use realism to kind of, as like a sleight of hand almost, to just get an audience to believe something. And I don't know, there's and there's so much artifice on top of everything. That's like, that bail scene was so hard for us, because the whole point of that scene is the audience needs to know he needs $10,000 to get his brother out of jail. And we added, you know, like 5 different eye lines, there's so many characters, there's 4 different phone conversations happening. He's on the phone, he's a real bail bondsman, by the way, speaking to the casting. And we had originally cast an actor in that role, and it felt so dead, because you can't have an actor playing that part that also is only supposed to be there for the purpose of narrative, because then everything falls apart. So the way it feels so real is by having an actor like Eric, who's amazing, who's dialed that number who knows how many millions of times. You know, he cuts his hand, he's just like muscle memory. And all of that added on top of each other, and he adds all of this just beautiful energy where he's saying like chaos to like Jen's character. And to me also, just to more to your point again, when we have his close-up, normally you would just kind of shoot it clean and have the audio perfect so you could put it whenever you want. But we had them yelling the entire time, so that it just kind of cornered us in a way that is real. So
we have time for one more question.
This guy back here. You.
Me?
Yes, you.
I really like the soundtrack. Can you talk a little bit about how you ended up getting One O Tricks involved, and like why you made that decision? Because it kind of seemed to me when I read the credits leading into the film, I didn't expect to see One O Tricks doing music for a film.
Yeah, he was actually the 3rd person attached to the movie before we even started making it. And he had seen our other film, and he really liked how, heaven knows what, and he liked how we used previous music to kind of feel like score, but it's not quite the same because you can't really do the same stuff. And so when we spoke to him, he just was on the same plane of what we wanted to do. He knew we liked Tangerine Dream, but he's like, I want to go. He thinks all like everybody, we always want to go much higher than our heroes, you know. So he said, I want to be better than them, you know, and I want to kind of, even though they create incredible sounds, he's like, there's this soup of emotion that they create, which is beautiful. He goes, but I want to break through with these solos. And he was really excited about creating something and just talking about it. And then he and Josh were working together really intensely on the score. And it just, after the fact, the movie was edited and done. And then it became, okay, how do we incorporate this sound into the film without hurting it, you know, because you don't want the music to just be slapped on top, giving you emotional cues, and you don't want the picture to be underneath, just kind of with music playing there, just like violins or whatever, just to pass the time. This needs to be a character in the film. It needs to all be connected. And he got it, and everything had a sound, you know, that just like in the bank when he's like using his pen in his hand, you know, all those things have little pings to it. And I guess it's a pretty classical way of approaching a score, but with new music and new ideas and new technology. So it was this nice confluence of an older way of thinking, but with a newer palette in a way. And then just the ending song was incredible because he we all knew that the perspective needed to change again. You know, it needed to become not Connie's world, but another world. And so he's like, I'll make this beautiful piece that's like piano based almost, and we'll do lyrics. And so he scoped out how the lyrics are supposed to go, and he's like, well, let's get somebody to sing the lyrics. And Josh was trying to think of somebody, I was trying to think of somebody. It was a very small world, and he's like suggested Iggy Pop. I'm like, yeah, right. It's like, how about Frank Sinatra or something? It's like, this is insane. And he's like, no, I can get to him. And his manager got to him, and then Iggy watches the movie and loves it. And then he ends up giving you this piece of music that tells you the movie from both points of view. One from Connie's point of view, like where he says that little spoken word bit about the strings, and then the other bit about petting the crocodiles, which came from a piece of his own life where he was saying in Detroit, outside of a trailer park, these kids were playing in like a creek or something, and he asked them what they were doing, and they mentioned something about like when they finally got out of there, they would go and pet the crocodiles, and that just stuck with him, and he attached that to Nick, you know, and he attached it kind of the way Nick says on the phone, we can do whatever we want when we want, and then that in turn is petting the crocodiles, something so dangerous yet so beautiful, and only he could like marry all this stuff together. But again, like Dan and Iggy worked this beautiful piece of music into the end, and it's like a title song for the movie. You know, it's really incredible. It has that same feel. Like if you go back to like Lethal Weapon, you know, there's like they have their titular song. Like Love is a Lethal Weapon. It's a really weird song, but in the same way, this movie does end with a vocal track, and it's like, and so that was interesting how Dan would always bring these almost like these classical forms to scoring to it, but with a completely whacked out, awesome mind to it too.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for coming.
Yeah, and please tell everybody to come if you felt anything at all. So.